Great, great. It's wonderful to be here. You know, Pastor Shepherd, he may not tell you, but he's my top PR guy. Right? You know, I love him because he does these introductions and make me seem like I'm important. You know, Pastor Shepherd reached out to me several weeks ago, and he asked me to come and talk about something I care deeply about, and it's about education and technology. And we live in a time that is so changing so quickly that we have no idea what tomorrow will be like in terms of technology. And I want to ask one question. How many of you in this crowd have had to tell a child to put down a video game? I see the hands. How many of you have had to tell a child to put down a book? And you know, those two questions have been a big part of my life because it's fascinating. You know, for a long time, and I run a technology company. I run a company called Epic 4D. We made the Great Bible Race, which is the world's largest Bible knowledge video game. We also make a game called the Itty Bitty Book App, which is the largest publishing platform for children who want to be authors. It's a huge platform. And every day, I ask myself a simple question. What can we do to engage kids in learning? Because that's the process. And for a long time, we've had this discussion. And I'll give you a story that will kind of put everything in perspective. This goes back about 30 years, and I'm going to date myself a little bit. This goes back about 30 years. I was an investigative reporter at the time, and I was working on a story on education in America, in particular the U.S. Virgin Islands, which is an American territory. And the purpose was to look at a particular problem that we were having in this country. The U.S. spends more per pupil than any country in the world, by far. Yeah, some countries come close, I shouldn't say by far, but you know, Singapore, some other countries come close in terms of per pupil spending, but we spend the most. And we were having some very poor results. It was so bad in the 1990s that the SAT scores were going down by such a high percent that they changed the rules for the SAT that allowed you to actually get questions incorrect and still get a perfect score, which kind of boggles your mind. And we understand a simple thing, because if our kids are not reading by third grade at grade level, they're 5 times as likely to drop out of high school. They're far more likely to get involved in the criminal justice system. And they're significantly more likely to be underemployed for much of their life. The Barbara Bush Literacy Foundation, one of the biggest foundations for literacy in the country, estimates that poor literacy, the lack of education for adults, and the average American adult reads at the 6th grade level. I mean, it's not, you know, they're not reading at 12th grade, at 6th grade level. That they estimate that this is costing the country, and these people who are being underemployed because of poor education, over $2 trillion a year. It's a stunning amount of money. It's almost the entire amount of money our government spends every year. And 2 trillion is, you know, it's a very, very big number, as all of you know. So when I did this story, I came away with this deep understanding that we had real problems. You know, kids weren't performing, we were spending money, the money wasn't effective. And we keep asking the same questions. Why won't our kids read? Why won't they learn? Why are all these problems? And when I stepped away from journalism and got into the educational video game and software business, I understood a simple thing. We have been asking the wrong questions. When I asked you the question about kids and books and kids and video games earlier, pretty much every hand went up when it came to put the video game down, right? Our question should be, what makes these games so addictive? Why are they so successful? And I want to give you some numbers that are going to let you understand, because I live with these numbers every day, because we have a software company, and we have to basically sit there and crunch these numbers. The video game industry produces $180 billion in revenue every year. That is more than the music industry and the movie industry combined. That's a billion with a B, right? And the reason they do it, and they spend money, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on some games. Call of Duty, all those games, very expensive. And they don't spend the money on programmers. All the money doesn't go for programmers. That money very often goes to neuroscientists, to specialist psychologists. They go to all the people who study what motivates and captivates people. And it's not the graphics and the shiny little things that get you. They have understood that video games live on the principle of rewards. You know, it's instant gratification. You do something, something happens. Because you ask yourself, why would a child spend hours trying to kill a dragon in a video game? And you can't get him to read a book for 10 minutes about a dragon, right? But he'll try to kill that dragon. He will try to go up a level in a video game, and he'll spend all weekend working on that. So we know they'll work. And we know that it's not their opposition to education, because, you know, kids learn every day. They fascinate us with the stuff they know. But the thing that the video game companies know, and know very well, is the psychology of how to get people hooked on video games. So what happens is this. There's what we call instant gratification. You know, you always get something. You see the little coins, you see the little tokens, they're all there. They're always there. You see your bar expanding when you do something, there's always a reward. And so what we did was, we said, you know, the whole manipulation is always a danger, right? But what if we took some of these principles and applied them to an educational video game? When we built the Great Bible Race, the thing we did, and the Great Bible Race is, for those of you, who here has not heard of the Great Bible Race? Has everybody heard of this game? Yes. When we built it, and I should tell you that we're about to bring out early next year a completely new version of this game, which will be multiplayer, interactive. It's gonna blow everybody away. But when we were doing that, we understood that when somebody's playing a game, a video game, they always want to know how they're doing. So when you get a question wrong in the Great Bible Race, it instantly tells you what the right answer is. It reinforces that. When you answer quickly, you get points. It's all there. Your avatar is racing against other people. The whole idea is we took these principles that were a part of this video game, Call of Duty, all the violent ones, and we took them and we made them a part of a game that actually educates people. It was a major, major shift in how gaming technology works. So it brings me to a few points, and I really wanted to touch on a few points here because I just want to make sure I don't leave anything on the table here. There was something in particular here, and we talked a little about getting the questions right, but the thing about video games, too, that I really want folks to understand, and the technology of AI, which is now a very big thing, is that we are teaching kids. You know, very often we sit in the classroom and we give them the technology, and we're teaching them how to operate that technology. And we're not giving them a reason to do it, you know, because they're just getting the pleasure from it. We buy all this equipment, which is why we spend more money than other people and get less for our money, less for less bang for our buck. And one of the things that I want to do tonight, and I'm going to walk through a few of the issues that I think are critical, but one of the things I want to do tonight is to actually share with you how we fix this. Because as a journalist, I spend time looking at the problem. This is bad. Here are the numbers. These are terrible things happening. But the idea is that we have to utilize that information to make a change. Because when our kids go out in the world and they're not prepared, they suffer, our community suffers, our country suffers. And so we understand this, and I'm going to tell you this. I was asked by a friend of mine who was a big fan of some of our products, and he says, what do you think is, technology would look like 50 years from now? I have no idea. None of us have any idea. The one thing I know is that this AI that we're all so fascinated about now is going to be so old school 50 years from now. These smartphones and the tablets that weren't around 50 years ago won't be around 50 years from now. I mean, everything is going to change. And what we want to do is that we are still teaching kids to deal with old technology. I don't want to do that. We have to prepare them for the future. And how we do that is by going to some very basic things. When you look at an AI product, the question isn't, hey, you ask AI to do something and it does it and you accept it. And I said, wait a second. You got to question AI. We want kids to think critically. I mean, that skill will never be old-fashioned. You have to ask hard questions. I mean, you really have to. And so what we want to do with this next generation that we are developing, and I smile because I understand that, I have a young granddaughter and she's 4. And I know that by the time she actually reaches retirement age, right, it'll be 2080. It'll be a long time from now. I have no clue what the world will look like. But the one thing I do know is that if we take these kids now and we give them the survival skills they will need, the critical skills that will be essential, they will help shape the world. Now, we have done, so I want to kind of talk a little about a product that we have developed recently. We developed a product called the Itty Bitty Book app. And the Itty Bitty Book app was a very ambitious app because the goal of that app was to create 1 million young published authors from around the world. The platform is pretty much free. You can get in-app purchases and things like that. But the idea was that we wanted people to empower kids. Because how you empower them is you let them know that they have something to say and you give them a platform to say it. So when we floated the app, we had people sending stories in from Africa. One of the first stories we had came from Gaza. And this was before October 7th, right? This was a young girl who had been, a young Palestinian girl who had lost a leg in an Israeli bombing that happened before October 7th. And she wrote a book about what her life was like and fighting back from this. And we had a young lady from Africa who was the second book we had from outside the US. And she talked about a conflict in Cameroon where her family had to flee because of violence. And I was struck by how kids in so many places are dealing with so much violence. And I wanted to share this with our kids because a lot of our kids too deal with violence. It's a little different, but they deal with violence. But they also deal with positive, helpful things. And the one thing I think we can do is that to understand, and this is a very Christian value, to understand our common humanity. We are all basically one people. We believe that we had one creator who made us. We believe he is our father. We believe that he looks over us. Yet still, we end up with all these silly arguments, right? And we all look at people differently. And, as part of my former career as a writer, right now, I should say former, I still write a lot. I worked in a book on the Civil War. And it was a book about Black soldiers who were fighting in this battle at New Market Heights. Now, that battle got my attention for one particular reason. There were 16 medals of honor given to Black soldiers in the Civil War. 14 were for that battle. Now, many of you have seen the movie Glory with Denzel, right? That was a Fort Wagner battle. There was one Medal of Honor. The Black guys lost. In New Market Heights, they won. That victory led to the fall of Petersburg and ultimately Richmond and ultimately the end of the war. And what struck me was when I was working on that book in 2004, nobody had ever written about it. When the debate took place in 1874 on the Civil Rights Bill, which was very similar to the Civil Rights Bill we had in 1965, that bill passed and then got shot down by the Supreme Court with Plessy and all that other stuff. But the thing that struck me was that in the debate in Congress in 1874, it was that battle that Congress people pointed to as the primary proof that Black people were actively involved in their own liberation. And we never heard the story. We haven't heard the stories about the Great Swamp Massacre dealing with Native Americans. There's so many stories that don't get told. And my thing is that what we are building is this platform where these stories get told. I'm going to tell you something that I don't know how many of you know this, but it's a really important historical fact. How many people here are familiar with the Papal Bull of Discovery? Okay, tell you what that is. 1492, the Portuguese traveled on the coast of Africa, and they see stuff, property, minerals, trees, people. And they go back and say, hey, we would like the legal right to take and exploit the African continent because we see stuff that we want. And Pope Nicholas at the time, Nicholas V, I think Nicholas V, issues what's called the Papal Bull of Discovery. And he basically says, look, you go to some site that you don't see European white folks there, the natives shall be deemed as wild animals. And wild animals cannot own things. They can't own, they're just like an elephant or an ape. They live in the land, they don't own it. And you can take it. So we fast forward to 1492. Christopher Columbus is in Spain. He's meeting with Ferdinand and Isabella, who have just united Aragon and Castile. They were warring groups, they're now united under one kingdom of Spain. And they're looking to basically do what the Portuguese are doing, because the Portuguese have gotten fairly rich and they're fairly big power at the time. Hard to imagine now Portugal is, is not a big player, right? So he goes to Isabella and Ferdinand and said, hey, fund this, and I'm going to find a new way to India, and we're going to get some riches and everything else. And he comes back because he discovers the Americas. And when I say discover, it's in air quotes. People were there. And so he goes back and he says, hey, I found all this good stuff. And can we claim it? Now, it so happened that Pope Alexander, who was the first Spanish Pope, is sitting there. And Pope Alexander is horribly corrupt. He's got a couple of wives. He's got children, which Pope shouldn't have. And he's made one of his sons the head of the Vatican army. The other is a cardinal. And he's just doing what he wants. He's living this great life. And so he issues a second papal bull that gives Spain the right to all this property. And so everything they discover, Spain can now claim under this papal bull. It impacted every Native American in this country. And I'm going to tell you how time travels and how these issues travel. So we reach from this point of 1892 to the American Revolution. 1776, the revolution begins. By the late 70s, they're discussing the form of government and they're putting a constitution together. And they have a problem because the land that was taken from Native Americans was taken under the papal bull of discovery. That was the law. And the problem they have now is that we are forming this country, so what do we do with the Native Americans? If we recognize them as people, they can now come back and say, well, hey, we're people, we want our property back. So the American Constitution ignores the Native Americans. They are excluded from it. And for Black folks who were enslaved, in some cases, some were not, they basically said, we're not going to recognize them, but ultimately they reached a compromise where you became 3/5 of a person. And that compromise was because slave-owning states wanted to count them. They didn't want to give them rights. They wanted to count them because they got greater representation. And so we begin with these things. And the part that I tell people about knowledge is that we have a number of itty books we're developing in those areas. We want our kids to read real history, right? Because we're not stuck in history. What the founding fathers did or didn't do is what they did or didn't do. It doesn't mean we're governed by that. These weren't magical people who got up there and saved the world. I mean, they didn't. These were people who looked out for their own interests. These are people who actually, when the US Constitution was originally written, there was no Senate, elected Senate. These were appointed so they could control what happened. We didn't have an elected Senate until 1916 or whenever that date was. Women couldn't vote until 1921. We know that this is a very imperfect union. And so what we understand, and I just gave this history to come back to technology, right, is that we now have all of this information, but our kids are playing video games and killing dragons and going up levels. And you want them to understand, look, this is what we build on. This information, because what happened 200 years ago and 250 years ago when this country came into existence doesn't determine what happens tomorrow. It doesn't. And so what we are trying to do here, and we are trying to spread this as like our little gospel here, right? Is an understanding that there is, as Christians, we know there's something that's right. We know there's something that's true. We know that if we grieve for an injustice one place, we should grieve for it in another place. I know that some people say, well, it's the law. Look, they brought a woman caught in adultery to Jesus. The law was clear. She should be stoned to death. Jesus, being the only perfect being, even by his question to them, saying, hey, look, first guy without sin, let him do this, right? He could have done it. But his life, and I know that I've had this discussion, and I was in a conversation with a number of pastors, and when Jesus said, I am the way, I think a lot of people take that to be, you got to come use my name, whatever. I think it was much deeper than that. I think he's saying, I'm showing you the way. My life is the way. This is exactly how we shape, the world. You cannot be that candle that nobody can see. No, not really. I mean, and so what we want to do here is that I understand technology. I know how it works. I know that there's this thing we have in gaming called the random reward. Now, the random reward is really manipulative because you want kids to keep coming to your video game, right? So there is progression where as you get further, you get more rewards, and that's fixed. They understand that, right? But a random reward, you don't know what you do to get it. You just log on and it pops up and you get it, right? So you don't know if you're going to get it tomorrow, but you know that you have to be involved to get it, right? And it pulls you in. It's manipulative, right? And we understand what they're doing because they're doing all of these things. And I explain to the people that I work with and the people around me. And when people come in to tell me, said, this would be a great addition to our game. I said, no. I said, how does this help the kid learn? We may trick him into logging in, right? We're manipulating him. But the question I ask all the time is, okay, explain to me how this makes the kid better. Explain to me how this works. I had some lessons. I learned this one, actually. This is one I had to learn. When we built the Bible Race first, we had this section of it that was, you got a grade based, it was a Bible study portion, and you got a grade. And sometimes if you got a bad grade, the game was snarky. It really said some things that, and I had some teachers that came into me that said, Brother Claxton, that's a mistake. And I said, well, I don't know, because for me, if somebody comes and says, look, this something snarky, I want to prove them wrong, right? But that's me. And I made the mistake of thinking that was everybody. Some of us are like me, right? But other kids always want to hear something positive. So now when we make games, we make sure that you get positive reinforcement. You get a bad score, hey, you can do better tomorrow. It's not so bad. It's not the worst score ever, right? And so what we have to do now, I think, is understand a very simple thing in terms of how we build this out. Because we have some objectives, I think, which are different than the world. People, and I've heard some people debate this a lot, and I had some pastors who are very well known, who I will not mention by name, right? But I'll mention by deed. When we talk about seeking riches and and prosperity and everything else, and I explained that it's not what I think I heard Christ say. He told the rich guy to sell his goods, give to the poor, follow him. He told the rich man that he was storing stuff up in his barn, and that was the craziest thing ever. And we are called here, because this is a limited engagement, 70 years for a man, reason of strength, or, fourscore. We're not here for a long time, but we are here for a purpose. And that purpose, if we are to be true Christians, that purpose has to be to make this place a better place than we met it. It has to add value, which is a critical thing, I think, when we look at how we form games. Now, we are asking a lot of parents to do something, because our itty bitty book, and Pastor Shepard will have my business cards, and the website is there. It's basically a free app. We have, for some special premium services, you pay a nominal amount. The app ultimately will be funded by sponsors who will have, and it won't be ads, because we won't let ads be in the game. They will have their products which kids can use in telling stories, whether it's a car from Mercedes or whoever else, right? So the idea for us is that we honestly believe that if we can use this technology to enhance and improve the lives of everyone around us, that becomes our great testimony. This is how we change the world. We change the world by getting people engaged, letting them understand the truth, because the truth really will set you free, unless you're guilty. But in a way it will. Spiritually will free you. You may end up in some penal institution, but that's a whole different thing, right? What I want to do, and I'm gonna open the questions in a bit, but the one thing that I really want us to understand is that we have this very precious gift, and these kids, wonderful, bright minds that we can help shape, and they will shape the future. And what we are trying to do with what our products is add value every day. And we can't do it alone. Parents have to be engaged. We do want parents engaged. We do want teachers engaged. We just had a project with the same IDIbook app with Fisk University in Tennessee. And I got a call from the professor who was running the IDI project for us. And she called me at the end of the first week and she said, "Mr. Claxton, I just wanted to give you an update." And I said, "How did it go?" She said, "Oh, it's great. The kids love it." She said, "But on the first day, I had this little 9-year-old kid who walked in. And he walks into the room and he looks around. It's a summer camp. And he wasn't properly briefed, right? So he comes in and he says, 'Where the basketballs at?' Basically, right? And I said, 'Well, there are no basketballs.' And he's suddenly sitting there and understanding this is a different kind of camp. And they tell him this camp is, about writing and creating books. And he says, 'Oh, boring.' The end of the week, he was the biggest proponent of the IDI app. He was out there, he's making books. He's telling stories because kids want direction and they want to understand that their lives have value, right? And they want a voice. And you hear them all the time. They speak up all the time. They demand to be heard. They'll argue with parents, right? And so what we want to do, and I really want to hear all the questions everybody has, and I want to answer as many as I can. We want to build, and Pastor Shepard has been a really dear friend and a strong support of our efforts. We literally want to change this world. We want to make sure that at the end of our engagement here, right, that something got better. And because it has to, because we're losing a lot of our young people. Our churches are losing them. Because they're seeing the shiny objects out there. They're getting the instant gratification. Imagine if you're trying to lose weight and you're sitting there and you only get to weigh in once a month. Really, you have no idea what's happening. The end of the month, you get in the scale, the numbers look bad, you give up. You need to instantly see what's taking place. So this is what we want. We want to use the techniques, and we will share all of them because there is so much research done here. When I mentioned the $180 billion that the video games companies make every year, and the money they spend on video games, it's because they know this. We have what's called a user experience specialist, and they play games and to see what the user experience is. You can make $150,000 a year doing that. And that's the nature of the world we live in. Our little kids are playing games and they're not making money. We need to let them know what's out there. It's a very, very different landscape. We've got to train our young people. We have to move people from being consumers to producers. And this is what the IDIbook does. You're not just reading a book or consuming it, you're actually producing a book. And I want to just wrap up here quickly on this because I really do want to hear all the questions. And I mentioned earlier that we have no clue what the new world is going to look like. None. We are here looking at the things, and we're training kids to function in a world that may not exist in 20 years or 30 years. We're teaching them things that may not have that value. Now, there's some things which are perennial. Decency, morality, ethics, those are things that they should be instilled in them. But the technical knowledge, no, it's not going to be the same. We know that. I remember when I started in journalism, we were using typewriters. Nobody does that anymore. The old Canon typewriter, and he gets in the composing room, that's different. The world has changed. And so what we want to do is to produce kids who can live in this world. And so I'm just grateful we had this little conversation. I certainly want to hear questions and expand on anything anybody wants me to expand. Yes, sir. Dr. Shepard?
Can we tell folk how they can get the itty bitty book for their young people?
Yes, the itty book, and Pastor Shepard has some. You're going to get the cards, right?
Yes, sir.
Everybody should get one. The itty book is a web-based app. It's, as I mentioned, you can use it for free. 90% of all people use it for free. You can produce books. It's at www.ittybittybook.com. You register for free, never take out your credit card, and you can create picture books, comic books, chapter books, audio books, musical books, books of poetry. In fact, we're now working on a really great, this is how we use AI, on a great concept, because we want kids to write. So we're working on a concept we call musical books, where kids write their lyrics, and we run those lyrics through AI. And it produces the music, the vocals, and the arrangement. And it's any genre. They want hip hop, they want soul, Motown, R&B. It will produce anything. And it's stunning. The quality of that audio is stunning. I did share a little bit of the audio with the good pastor, and I think he will testify that it did not seem AI generated. And we are also working, we have a section that allows our kids to write scripts and screenplays. And we are working, this will happen later this year, where their scripts and screenplays can, using AI, create short videos. So we're looking for the next Steven Spielberg. I mean, really, right? They give the directions and AI generates this. So the itty bitty book again is at www.ittybittybook.com, and just sign up for free and use the app and have as much fun as you want. Now, the thing I should mention is the people who actually think they have a really good book or think that their books should be seen publicly, because you can share the book with your friends, but you can upload the book to our bookstore. We have an online bookstore we've just opened, and you can upload and sell the books, and you get to keep 50% of the revenue, So it's all about giving incentives, because we believe in rewards. Another question? Oh yeah, well we do. We don't stop them, right? The purpose was to create this great big platform for kids, right? And then we have all these adults who came in, and we just said, look, we open to everybody. Ultimately, when the store gets to be really big, we will break away the kids from the adult books. So you'll be able to click on a link, and it will take you to books by adults or books by children. Yes. Yes.
Is it free for classrooms or is it just free for individual signups?
Well, it's what we do with classrooms. And we did this with a few classrooms. We allow them to have the book free for a period because ultimately we are a for-profit company, right? You know, but we will get kids engaged at this point, and we certainly, because with the Fisk University, we gave them this thing for free for a certain period, and we're doing that with classrooms just because we believe in the product so much that once they've seen it and used it, we know they'll come back. Yeah, but I think when we were talking, it was a mobile version, right? No, we're way past that. This new version blows everybody away, you know. So, but it's we want it in every classroom. In fact, in August we begin a project with the University of the West Indies, where they will promote it on all the islands across the Caribbean, in schools across the Caribbean. So it's a really big project for us. But we do want it in schools. We really want it in schools. Additional questions? You know, I'm gonna ask a question. I'm gonna get a chance to ask a question now. If I asked people here the kinds of books they'd like to see us develop and work on, are there particular kinds of books that you think your kids would love to see? Because I know we have people who come to us, and I know we're doing this with Africa especially, because a lot of these fairy tales that we have come out of Europe, you know, and the animals are very European, right? And but each country and each continent has their own, you know, fables and everything else. But are there some issues that you would love to see us tackle in books? You know, we want to get feedback like that, the stories that we want, because I know that people connect when they see people who look like them. Yes. Well, what we hope, because a lot of the content won't be created by us. We want the content to be created by the kids and other people. So we want a lot of it to be about the motherland. We really do. We want, and not just the stories of conflict, because we hear that, right? But our goal is to get those stories generated, because in fact, there's a book we have now in the store, which is an intriguing book, because a relative of mine did his genealogy, traced his roots to, I'm not sure, Burundi or one of the African countries, and took his kids there to kind of connect with his family. And he gets there and he tells them why he's there. And then they start telling him about the return, this concept of the people who kind of came back. And one of the things that he connected with was that we spend a lot of time, when we talk about slavery, we spend a lot of time dealing with what happens to slaves who are brought here, but very little about what happens to the people who are left behind. Because you know, a child goes missing and the mom is going to grieve for the rest of her life if the child is never found. She's going to wonder where a child is, what's happening. And there's a book called 7 Prayers to the Sea, which is a very short, because our books are short. The indie books are meant to be quick reads, right? And it's about a mom whose son is taken and into captivity and taken across the ocean. And she goes to the sea every day and makes a prayer. And the book is about those individual prayers. You know, and she talked about the food she made for him that he won't eat. She worries about if they're taking, abusing her son, and she worries about if he's even alive. And she issues those prayers because we don't often think of that, because the stories are all about the folks who come and how they suffer. But the people who are left behind suffer too. And the one thing I think happens when people see people as people, a lot of the prejudice breaks down. Because genetically, there's only one race. There's not a black race or a white race. It's a human race. Every single scientist will tell you that. Yes. Yeah.
Dealing with a more targeted market with kids, what about autism kids? Will what you're working with or what you're putting out there, if you have a child or a grandchild or niece, nephew that has autism, will this perk their interest to want to become more involved and help them to evolve? Can your program also allude to this sector of children?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question, because that's an issue that we have discussed intensely. Now, there are certain elements of the program as it exists now that makes it attractive for autistic kids. It's graphic driven. We understand autism is not about intelligence. We know that. We know it's brilliant kids. They just see things differently. I'm gonna get to you in a second. Let's answer this question. But we are currently working with experts. In fact, we have she's from Florida. She's a specialist, Dr. Susan, who is helping us work on particular types of books that will connect with autistic kids. We are looking at issues like the dark mode, because some of them are, light affected, right? Photosensitive. So it's a really, really good question, but that's something that we're specifically working on, because ultimately, everybody has to be involved. And in fact, we have a little book in the Itty store right now called My Superpower, which is autism, right? And we deal with the fact that there's some things, like some autistic kids will just spot something you'll miss. Their mind works that way, right? And we want to make sure people understand that this is one of those things where we have a platform, this huge platform that we can tackle all of these things. And certainly we will spend some time. We actually have a book that is being developed now. And I was talking to Pastor Shepard about it, because it's about sign language, where the book will be produced in sign language. It has an image, it has an English text, but also, an ASL kind of certified images, so people can communicate with people who use sign language and understand. So, I live in a different world than most of the people who make video games. I really do, and software. And for me, the end result, because every day, and I know that I have some associates who are not crazy about it, but pretty much every week or a couple of weeks, we have these people who are making inquiries about becoming investors, because they understand the size of this platform. But I also understand if we let certain people in the door, we lose it. Because then I'm sitting there every day and they're saying, how does this make us more money? And that's not the goal. There's a very famous case in America. It's Dodge versus Ford. And Ford had absorbed the Dodge Brothers company. And they're now on the board. And Henry Ford, this is back 1916, 1915, somewhere around there. Henry Ford, they have record profits. They're making lots of money. And Henry Ford says, you know what would be great? If we took some of this money and we gave it to, increase the salaries of our workers. They can now buy cars. We're going to get a lot of this money back. They'll be happy. We won't have the turnover. And the Dodge brothers said, no, 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 no. The purpose of a board is to ensure the profitability of the shareholders. That money comes to us. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that the obligations of a sitting board member is to maximize the profits of the shareholder, not the worker, not make a product that the consumer is going to love. It's the profit of the shareholder. And that is the law of the land in America. You know, you're on a board, you know, workers don't come. So for us, you know, we understand the moment we go public with something like this, we lose it. You know, people are going to sit there. Why is the game free? Okay. You know, you have all of these people who are willing to pay you good money, right? Why do you make it free for so many people? And of course, I mean, ultimately, I'm sure you'll see me on the cover of like Fortune, worst businessman in America. But we can live with that. I mean, we really can live with that because ultimately we know the lives we change. We know the people who need this most are the ones who can afford it least. We understand that, you know, so, but certainly autism is big and we want to tackle that. That's a great question. Yes, sir.
Yes, I was want to ask, does this book help, say, young kids want to get into research, scientists, physicians, technical, engineering, and things like that?
Well, this is a good question, a great question, because it's a two-tiered system here, right? In that we want kids to write. So we encourage them, if you're doing your research for like a paper in science, we want you to do that, right? And to share that information. We also have books that are being produced, STEM books, that explain a lot of this stuff. So the purpose is we'll have a platform that has something for everybody. You know, there are books right now on gravity. There are books on molecular structure. You know, there's a great book that explains atoms, at which, you know, these tiny little building particles, right? And we know scientifically that matter is not destroyed or created, right? Outside of what God did. But matter basically exists. So every being that's ever lived on this planet, they don't just disappear. You know, they change. They break down this molecular structure, and whether a plant absorbs some of this substance, but ultimately, all of their atoms, you may currently, because every time you eat something, you absorb the atoms that you eat, and that absorbs the atoms from something else. Some of us may have atoms in us that were part of a very famous person who lived a long time ago, or maybe a very bad guy, or an animal. I mean, so we have books like that that basically encourage people to think, and we're looking to have them create more. But the goal is, the store is new. It's got maybe a couple hundred books now. It will ultimately have thousands of books. And we are doing and STEM and STEAM type things are very important to us. And we are also encouraging kids to create their own. And to, when they do their research, bring it. We want to see it, publish it. You know, go out there and let the world see what you have done. And I think that's going to be a big part of what we do. But that's a very, very good question.
Okay. A lot of children I've dealt with throughout the years, even my nieces and nephews being in their 20s and 30s, have this attitude, what's in it for me? So when I took notes and everything you're saying, what's in it for me? That's including with the Bible. I mean, Jesus really walked on water, Auntie Monique. Come on now. I mean, he turned water into wine, all that. So I say that because what's catching their attention is I don't know anything about technology like that, but I know that they have these virtual reality. Can we make this book come alive? Can we get to the point where, just like AI is scary, especially for people who ain't in their right mind, because you start talking to AI, how you doing? Tell me, how are you doing today? I'm like, oh no, Jesus, this is going all the wrong way. Can we take something to bring that into like when Moses being adopted? I mean, well, that's where I'm going. You know, Moses was shipped down the river, okay, and picked back up. But relate that to children who has been adopted, then in foster care, make it reality to where their situation is at, and bring it into a visual aid. That's the best way I can say that.
No, that's actually good. Now, there are some limitations to what we are doing, because there are other people who are doing the videos, right? Other people who are creating that, and that's the basis. We're a book creation app. But having said that, we also use a lot of AI to generate images and to tell stories. And all of the stories actually have audio. Because the thing about itty stories, they come inherently built in with an AI reader that can read the stories. We also have, hi Zeke, could you pass my phone a second? The big one. I'm gonna let you listen to something for a second, if I can. You think if I play one of those songs, you should? You know, because, thank you, sir. You were asking a question about how we use AI. And AI, we use it a lot, and we've been using a lot more. I mentioned that we're creating this idea of a musical book, right? It's kind of like the Disney musicals, but it's in a book form, where you have, narrative, a discussion, then you have the dialogue, then somebody breaks into song, and it's all in the book form. This is one of the things we are producing here. I hope you can hear it. Hold on here. We are, in about a month, we will have a new book. Now, the comic books are great. The kids can create comic books, I think, better than any comic book out there, right? They can do all that stuff. But we are using AI to get young kids, because kids are into music. You hear them. And so we're saying, take your lyrics, and we will run them through the AI program, and you'll have an itty musical book where you'll actually hear your song come alive. Because you don't have a studio, you don't have backing, and some of them, a lot of them really can't sing, right? So, but you can write lyrics, because that's what we push. This is a song, and this is not necessarily for kids, but this is I years and years ago I did a book of romantic poetry, right? And I just took it for a prototype, because we're creating this book, and I hope you can hear it. If you can't, but you should be able to. And we're letting kids do this. They can write their lyrics, run it through our system. It will generate the music and songs, and then it will be in book form, which they can share with people or even sell. So I'm just gonna let you say. Hold a second. I think I am going to the wrong place here. I think it's going to my headset. See, I'm gonna turn it off. If you give me a second. Any other questions? I'll come back to this in a second.
Yes, sir. I have a question.
Yes.
A little while back, you asked, are there any good, not titles, but book ideas that kids might be interested in? I have an idea that kids would be interested in, and parents as well. All kids get in trouble. I mean, and this goes for adults and kids.
Okay.
All people get in trouble, but they don't always know how to get out of trouble. Most time when a kid gets in trouble, they're not doing it intentionally, but when they don't know how to get in trouble, they just keep making it worse. They keep digging that ditch and don't know how to get out. This could be a book that parents read to their kids to help them, just give them some ideas and concepts to, okay, you got in trouble. That's okay. How do we get out of it?
Because as adults, we get in trouble, and sometimes we don't know how to get out of it. So as a parent reading this kid to a book, you might hear something that hits you too. That would be beneficial.
And that's a brilliant idea. I mean, that's a brilliant idea. And I don't just want one. I don't just want one book. I'd like to see lots of books like that because they're different scenarios. I mean, really. I mean, look, the idea here, well, you know, and that's true. I mean, you could be our author in this one. You could tell this story. Look, there is nothing outside of, you know, inappropriate material, which we won't allow on the platform. I mean, the idea of working with kids, letting them understand things. You know, I was invited to a school once to speak. And so I get to the school and I'm assuming I'm going to talk about like what I'm talking about here, right? I'm going to talk about business, about how there are just lots of professions. You don't have to be a basketball player or something. You can actually do things and change the world. And I get there and I'm in the green room waiting to go into the auditorium. And I'm with two guys, you know, kind of shady guys, and they look kind of, you know, they're shifting around. And one said to me, "What were you in for?" And I said, "In." You know? and I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, I did, you know, this for carjacking. And the other guy said, "I was in for so-and-so." And he turned to me and said, "You look like a white collar criminal." Well, I said, no, I was never in, right? And so I go to the teacher who invited me, and she said, "Well, Mr. Claxton, we were thinking you had covered crime when you were a reporter, and you would explain." I said, no, I don't do scared stuff. I don't do that. If you want me to come and tell the kids something positive, how we can change their life, but I'm not going to tell them stuff about, you know, shanks and stuff like that, right? You know, I mean, and this is part of this because that idea is really good because if kids get positive reinforcement, not negative, you know, not the negative stuff. I mean, that's your idea really is a brilliant idea. And we'd love to see, and I'm going to enlist you as one of my book creators. And we will even do, we'll do a big one for you. We'll generate all of the images for your book. But if Pastor Shepherd, I'm going to see if I can play this here. So now these are a series. This actually is a poem that was written to be a wedding anthem, right? So, and we used AI to generate this, and the voice, the music, everything in this is AI. So, can you hear it?
Promise to walk down the paths of life with you, to share your miseries and cherish your joys, to give you all love I can deliver, and catch your tears when friends are few. It's my darling, promise you. And when the storms of life surround us and the nights come along, I will stand beside you always. You will never walk alone. For every vow my heart spoke will remain forever true. With every breath and every heartbeat, my love I pledge to you.
This is an AI voice. That is an AI voice. The music is AI. Only the lyrics are ours. This is what we're going to offer kids. They're going to be able, whether it's hip hop and stuff. In fact, you know, the wife will tell you, I have a gentleman who is a really good friend of mine, and he does a lot of handiwork and some property. And he brought his lyrics and said, hey, I would love for you to run it through the system and get me a song. And we did. And his girlfriend called and said, I think I'm ready to get married. You know? So it works. All I can say, it works, right? But this is it. See, we have given these kids multiple platforms. They could do picture books, comic books. They can even create their own newspapers. We actually envision children here in Indianapolis working with kids in Jamaica or Africa, creating papers, international papers. That's something we want to work on. So the world is a small place now, very tiny place. And we're going to make sure we keep it really small. So, but definitely, this is what we're doing.
What about if a person has already written multiple books and want to enter into your program with their books?
They can. The thing that we do, though, is that Itty Books, we like to call ourselves the TikTok of the book world because the books are short. You know, we don't have books 300 pages, that kind of thing. Our books typically anywhere between 13 to maximum about 30 pages and lots of pictures and everything. It's a kid's store, really, right? So, but if you have books or you want to modify a book to get a kid version of it, we'd love that. I mean, just use the app, right? Really, right? Before some crazy guy gets rid of me and then the app is no longer free. Yes.
And what if they do you have a child that likes to draw, but don't know how to put the words to the drawings that they draw? How would you do that?
Well, they can do just a drawing, but one of the things we're doing now, and this is going to happen by early August, we're adding a speech-to-text feature so they can tell their story for the pre-literate kids. So they can tell, and it will generate. We are still asking parents to look it over and make sure, you know. But the idea is, we you know, there's some books that are just picture books with no text. You know, we have this concept where we tell kids, we give them images that tell a story. There's no text. And we say, okay, put it together like a puzzle and show me the narrative of the story. This is where it starts, this is where it ends, and you walk right through it. So we welcome all of that. And, you know, they just want to play with the app and draw, and some of them don't want to share. They will share with their parents, but, you know, not everybody wants to load it up in the store. But in fact, most of them don't put it in the store, right? You know, but they can share it. You can actually share this on Facebook, any place you want, directly from the app. You know, we give them that ability to do what they want with it, and they can create a link and they can email it. Now, if somebody emails you an Itty book, you don't have to have an Itty account. You can still read the book. Have I exhausted all the questions? Sure.
I just want to know, for the unfortunate people that didn't make it, that are missing out on this, is this being recorded so that they can listen to it later or hear it later?
I think
That's
it is,
what I
yes.
wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to. I'd like to know what you do to encourage children to come to your website, contest, or anything like that to make them aware of who you are. How do you advertise?
Well, currently we are working with a number of organizations. We will do that. There will be an Itty book competition coming up where there'll be one of the things I don't want to do is that, because nobody can comment on a child's book on our site, but the child, because I don't want them being bullied. I don't want that kind of thing. So there is no connection with anybody else. You can see their work if they put it up, but you can't comment about it. But we are working right now with organizations that have lots and lots of people that, you know, literacy groups and everything else, and they're bringing their people to it, and we're working with schools. But, you know, as this grows, because we're still building this platform, as it grows, you will see us more aggressively out there recruiting people. And we depend heavily on the word of mouth from people like you. We do these sessions and we hope that people go and carry it out to the world, because that's very important.
Okay, that was my second question is what do you want us to take out of this room, out to, what would the simplest, easiest way to approach someone, give them a spill? What's going to do? Children, is there anything, formula or anything like that we could do
Well, we
to
know,
entice other people to get interested and have their children get interested?
we know that kids who write read better. We know that, right? We know that in some of our communities, 94% of our kids are reading below the national average, which is already bad enough, right? So we know that there is a really great need. And I think the thing we tell people is that there is an app that actually gives kids a chance to express themselves, to have a voice, to be heard. The app is pretty much free. And that it's based on technology that we know works. We are using technology that has worked in many places. We have developed this with a lot of experts in different fields, and we're constantly looking for feedback. People come to me all the time. They call me and say, why don't you guys do this or that? And we do it because it makes sense. So we're here as sponges, and we will take any advice from anybody because we're not that arrogant. Because the goal at the end of the day, and it's funny because people, I have guys who pitch ideas, and I said, what if we do so-and-so? And I said, well, they say, oh, God, it will look really great. It would be great. And I said, well, how does it help the kids learn? And because that's the criteria. If it doesn't engage them, if they don't learn, then it doesn't have that power. And it's not likely, you won't see it. I think there was a question in the back. Okay, yeah. Are we?
Can you comment on future competitions for the kids to look at?
Oh, okay. We actually have been working, and we are very, very open to suggestions. We're working on the idea that by next year, we will have an ITI competition in multiple genres of books, where we're asking kids to compete, and there'll be prize money and everything else, and some other things. But we also are asking communities to create their own competitions. I would love to see something here in this church where you're asking people to create books on different topics. We have a series of books we created on, these were audiobooks on the Bible. And we have one of the great and well-loved renditions of the audio Bible, the King James Version. And we took it into pieces and added some AI introductions. So during Easter, we brought out it was the Last Supper, the Temptation, and ultimately the crucifixion. And, we want kids to start telling their own versions of Bible stories. We want kids to tell what's happening in their daily lives. And we are going to have, I believe, ultimately competitions which allow, because I want as many people to win as possible. So, because we want to, because there's something magical when a child knows his work is being recognized. It's just that a level of confidence. I remember when I was still in college, I was doing my internship, and I went to this paper, and I got my first story on the front page. I was grown. I was in college, right? It was just a crazy feeling, right? I took up the paper that day. There was my first front page story, and it was wonderful. And when kids get to see their name on a book, and they're the author, and other people are reading their book, it's a fascinating, powerful kind of thing for them. And so what we want to do is we want to give everybody that experience. And I really am thankful that everybody came out tonight, because this was a wonderful session. I got to do this more often, because You know, I sometimes get trapped up in that space where every day, in fact, today we were updating our chapter book. And I had this back and forth when I was on my way down here, you know, and so the idea for us ultimately is that I do need to spend more time with you guys. I mean, I really do, because this is why we do it. And you're the folks that actually bring all the stuff and make it fun. You know, sit in the dark room going over programs. It's not the same thing. It's not this. You do need to get out sometimes. Pastor Shepherd, thank you so much for inviting me. I had a great time.
Before you step down, I want them to understand that there is a book that you can go out and get on Amazon, right?
Nice. It's on Amazon.
This is Uncommon Valor. This is the book that he was speaking of, about the battle that happened that you were involved in. So go out and get this on Amazon.
Well, thank you.
Who knows, maybe the next time he's in town, he might sign it for you. You can say you have a signed copy. But we want to thank Brother Claxton so much, and I want to recognize his wife Zena. We didn't have her come up and sing or anything like that, but we did want to recognize her and let her know we appreciate you coming and escorting this young man and making sure that he got here.
Wouldn't have made it without her.
Come on, let's give them both a hand. All right. Well, I am excited that you've come out tonight. And again, you're going to be able to see this on our YouTube channel. Yes, forward it to as many individuals as you know, because they need this information. And yes, we will work on having a book competition.
Yes, good.
And I know we've got Elder Hoke in the audience. He's written several books, and maybe he can help us spread the word about this book app to some of the young people that he's going to come across. So again, let's give Dr. Claxton another hand. All right, Brody. Thank you, sir.